Welcome, everyone. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina, and I am the Director of College Planning and Education at MEFA. And we welcome you this evening to MEFA's webinar called A Sibling's Perspective on Financial Planning with Able Accounts. And we have two terrific panelists for you tonight. We have Mary Rubenis, who is the Attainable Program Manager at MEFA. And she's going to talk with you about ABLE programs and the Attainable program here in Massachusetts and how that works. And then we have a wonderful guest presenter, Alex Nadworny, who is a certified financial planner and also has a sibling with special needs and is going to share with you both from a professional and a personal standpoint how she works with ABLE accounts and how they can help families. So I'm going to turn it over to them in a moment, but I just want to make sure that that you can hear me and you can hear others and you can see the screen and the slides. So this is the way you can participate. There's a question section on the right of your screen, and you should be able to click on that and you can ask any questions that you'd like all throughout the webinar. And so just so that I can tell that you can hear and see, I'll ask a question now about if you'd like to say a few words about your interest in this webinar and why you're joining us tonight, and do you have a special family member or friend or someone you work with, or do you work for an organization that you are here for, and to hear more about ABLE and Attainable and how to incorporate these into financial planning. So if you want to just share a couple of words, that will be helpful, and then we'll know that you can hear well and see well, and I'll just take a look at that.
And I actually recognize some of the names here, so really excited to see everybody.
And even, maybe, it's evening, we've probably all had a long summer day. So even if you don't have a lot to share, but just maybe let us know that you can hear and see the slides, just so we continue on. Let's see. I was just hoping to get a little confirmation. Okay, well, I see everyone.
Oh, great, we just got one.
Yep, great. Perfect. Okay, good. That's what we just like. And oh, I see a few. I think there was a delay. Okay, that's great. And we have some parents on the line, and seems like people can see and hear well. That's great. All right, so then we'll get started, and I think we'll start with you, Mary. And would you like to share a little bit about Attainable and ABLE and share that with folks? That would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Julie, and thank you, Alex, for doing this tonight. I'm really excited to do this together. I think presenting this information in the context of, real life, everyday financial planning is really important. So I'm really happy that we can do this together. So my role at MEFA, I am the Attainable Outreach Manager, and essentially really what I try to do is I do educational outreach on Attainable, which is the Massachusetts ABLE Savings Plan. It is available nationwide. It's not just for Massachusetts residents. And so really my role is to, create awareness about the benefits of these accounts. And I do that through a lot of, things such as, these webinars and previously in-person events when we were able to do those. But I work with, local organizations, state organizations, and also employers just to share this information so people are aware that they exist. So before I start, I'll just share, MEFA is the state sponsor of Attainable and Fidelity is the program manager. And so what that means is if you're going to open one of these accounts, you do that through Fidelity. And so I usually just like to share a little bit about that partnership and how that came about. Back in 2017, when Attainable was launched, we chose Fidelity Investments to be the program manager for Attainable. And the reason that came about was we had a previous relationship with them dating back to 1999 when MEFA was tasked with being the state sponsor for the Massachusetts 529 College Savings Plan. And we chose Fidelity at that point to manage those accounts for us as well. And so when Attainable, this ABLE plan was launched, it was natural for us to partner with them, you know, for their expertise, obviously, in money management. And also just to mention quickly that ABLE is a 529A. And so it's in the same tax code as the regular college savings 529. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that partnership and how that came about. And then I'll just start at the beginning. You know, what is the ABLE Act and how did this come about in these accounts? And so the acronym actually stands for, it's the Stephen Beck Jr. Achieving a Better Life Experience. And this legislation was passed federally back in 2014, and it added this section to the tax code, which is a 529A or an ABLE account. And so the legislation established these ABLE accounts, and these accounts are tax exempt or tax free on the earnings that you're making on these accounts for a qualified individual with a disability to use it for qualified disability expenses. We'll talk about what those look like, while still keeping their eligibility for federal public benefits. And that was really the real reason, or one of the main reasons for this to come about, was that, you know, currently it still exists. There's a $2,000 asset cap. So unless you have an ABLE account or a special needs trust, you have to stay under that $2,000 or else you'll start to lose some benefits. So that was really the impetus for these ABLE accounts to get passed. And then just a little fact about it as well is when this was passed, which was now 30 years ago, it just celebrated actually the 30th anniversary. ABLE was one of the most significant pieces of legislation to pass since the ADA, which was passed 30 years ago. And 85% of Congress supported the ABLE Act. So it was a very significant thing for this legislation to come about and to get passed. And so how do you become eligible for an Attainable account or an ABLE account? Attainable is just the brand name. It's a Fidelity brand name for our program, but it is an ABLE account. Like I mentioned, it's available nationwide. The person with the disability is going to be the beneficiary or the account owner on an ABLE account. So they the account is going to be in their name. And in order to be eligible for one of these, the disability has to have occurred prior to the age of 26. And then if they're getting SSI or SSDI, they're automatically eligible to open one of these. Even if they're not getting those benefits, but they meet the age requirement, and essentially they meet one of these conditions that are listed. Social Security has a list of compassionate allowances, or you're essentially self-certifying that you have a diagnosis that's a physical, mental health impairment, some type of functional limitation. Social Security has a list in this blue book that they have. Then you're eligible to open an ABLE account. So again, you meet the age requirement and you're meeting one of these disabilities, then you're able to open one of these. And so these are some of the expenses, qualified expenses that you can use for an ABLE account. This is a general category of expenses. I tell people it's not exhaustive. There are going to definitely be things that fall outside this, but generally, you know, it covers things that are really part of your daily life, essentially, and that some of these you need just to function and support, living with your disabilities. So it's really healthcare, housing. You can pay your rent, your mortgage with one of these. You can use it for education. You can also use it for transportation, buy a car, handicap accessible vehicle. assistive technology, employment training, personal support services if you need a PCA, and basic living needs, you know, clothing, that type of thing. Again, general categories for what this is used for, but certainly things like if you had a child that needed to go to therapeutic camp in the summer, would that be covered with an ABLE account? Absolutely. So just want to give you a sense as to what you can use these for. And then some of the benefits, I mentioned this, touched on it briefly before, but it allows the account owner or the beneficiary the ability to save over $2,000 without it affecting their federal benefits if they are receiving them. Like I mentioned, this account, it's owned by the individual with the disability. They're the account owner. I should mention here, if they can't manage the account themselves, you can set up what's called a PSA, a person with signature authority, on the account with that individual. And speaking for our program, that person, the PSA, would need to be a parent, a guardian, or a power of attorney, and then they would manage the account for that individual. So the person with the eligible individual, they would be the account owner, and then they would have a PSA that's attached to the account that would manage it for them. And then really, it's really about providing financial independence with these accounts. You know, it offers new investment opportunities that you can invest your money in, and there are tax benefits as well. I mentioned one earlier. You're not going to pay taxes on the earnings as long as you're using it for a qualified disability expense. So there's no federal tax. And no, in Massachusetts, no state tax on the earnings if you're using this the way it's intended. And then just some quick account features for specific to attainable. And across the board nationwide, 15,000 is the cap per year in a calendar year that you can put in an ABLE account. 100,000 is the number to keep in mind. If you are getting SSI, you can save up to $100,000 in an ABLE account with no impact on your SSI. And then 400,000 is the total that the account can grow to, including, you know, any gains that you've made in the account. So that's the max for attainable that you can have in the account currently. And then these are just some tax updates I wanted to cover briefly. One is this ABLE Financial Planning Act, and provided that the beneficiary is the same individual on both accounts or a family member of the other, it allows you to transfer funds up to the 15,000 from a regular 529 college savings plan into an ABLE account with no tax or penalty. So Alex might actually touch on this in a little bit later, but I know that they see a lot of this come up with clients where a family might have saved in a 529 thinking that that individual, their child, potentially might be going to college, and then potentially if that doesn't happen, they're able to now transfer this money into an ABLE account with no tax or no penalty. The other one, which is really great, is Able to Work Act, and that this legislation essentially allows the ABLE account beneficiary or account owner, if they're working, they can contribute over that annual limit of 15,000. It's based on their adjusted gross income, but they are able to contribute over that 15K, which is fantastic. And then lastly, just to mention this, if you have an ABLE account and you're applying for financial aid for college, you have to fill out a form that's called the FAFSA, and that's a federal application for federal student aid. And so they came up with guidance. If you have an ABLE account, you don't have to list it, on the FAFSA, or I should say, it's excluded as an asset. So it's not counted in determining your financial aid eligibility, which is fantastic. So if you have an ABLE account, you don't have to worry about that impacting any financial aid that you might receive. And then just some resources quickly I always like to share that are really great. The first one is this ABLE National Resource Center, or ablenrc.org. If you haven't gone there, I highly recommend you go. It's a phenomenal site that really just teaches you everything about ABLE. They do webinars all the time that you can sign up for. If you're on social media, follow them on social media because they do post a lot of content. Obviously, the MEFA site, which is mefa.org, We also post blogs and continue to push out new content related to ABLE. And we also have a lot of local resources on our site as well. So I encourage you to go there. If you're going to open one of these accounts, this is the landing page, fidelity.com/able, where you would go to open an attainable account. And then lastly, on the MEFA site, you see this link. This is where you would go if you wanted to sign up to register for emails that we send out, where we would send things like, in fact, we promote these webinars. So if you want to, stay informed about upcoming webinars, you would go there, and also blog content that we post related to ABLE or disability related content. You can sign up on the MEFA site for those as well. And then I also wanted to share this. Social Security actually has this document called the POMS, or POMS. It's Program Operations Manual System. And it's a great resource, to really, it really gets into ABLE and how it intersects with Social Security. So I always like to share it with people to become familiar with it and just, just gain some insight as to what SSA is saying about ABLE accounts. And they do update it, so it's a good thing to be aware of. So I just wanted to share that screenshot for you. And then lastly, this resource, this popped up during COVID, and it's really a great resource. The National Disability Institute, or NDI, they manage ABLE National Resource Center, and they launched this new set of resources during COVID to really help people financially who have a disability. And so they launched this Financial Resilience Center, and essentially you can go there and get free, some financial counseling or planning, education, coaching. And it's online. They offer some financial wellness training. And so this is the landing page, the link to go and do that. And there's resources and assistance that are offered just free of charge. So I just wanted to share that. This is a great thing that popped up during COVID. And the other thing I forgot to mention, I think when I started, is the slides, as well as another fact sheet for attainable ABLE, are in the, you can grab them from the panel. You'll see I uploaded the PowerPoint slides, so you can grab them there if you would like. And I'll also send them when I send out the link after the webinar is over. And this is just my contact information. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out, my email. And I encourage you to follow MEFA on all the social channels, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and YouTube, where we post, not only college-related content, but also disability-related content, the webinars that we do on ABLE, and just, again, just share information there. So I encourage you to follow us there as well. And I think I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Yeah, so Mary, thank you. And we're going to move on to Alex in a moment, but I just have one question that I thought maybe would make sense for you to answer right now,
Sure.
Which is, my daughter has autism and is 10 years old. Can I open an ABLE account now, or do I have to wait until she's 18?
No, she could she qualifies, she can definitely open one now. Absolutely.
Good. I just thought that was good for whoever asked that to know that right up front. So that's great. So yes, so now, thank you, Mary. So now we're going to turn it over to Alex. And Alex, I'm just going to ask you to share about your career and how it's evolved, your financial planning career and how it's evolved both personally and professionally. And, you can talk a little bit about, or a lot about, how you help families and how you incorporate ABLE accounts into your work with families.
Thank you so much, Julie. Thank you so much, Mary. That was so informative, I think, to give us a high level, of the ABLE account. And MEFA has been extraordinary with, coordinating these different webinars, this information out there, and have not stopped, even given obviously these crazy times that we're all in. So I'm happy that we're still able to connect, and I love seeing some familiar names on here. So I know a couple of you, but for the ones that I don't, my name is, Alex Nadworny again. And Mary, if you don't actually mind going to the next slide, this is kind of one of my favorite presentations because I get to talk a little bit about, my little brother and kind of the planning and why I do what I do, which is, I think, really important and kind of why I'm so passionate about this and working with families so much my own. So this picture here, this is actually on the right side. That's my father, John Nadworny, Cindy Haddad in the middle, and then myself on the left. So I joined the team about 7 years ago. We were actually at a previous firm. We launched Affinia Financial Group this October, and still doing the same thing, working with families like our own that have loved ones with special needs to figure out, given all the toolbox in all the different tools in the toolbox, what do you use and when? So, Mary talked a lot about the ABLE accounts, which again is so exciting for the law to be passed back in 2017 to have these be an option for families. And there are some really good strategies that folks can use, including, using a 529 plan that maybe there's leftover funds from a sibling to kind of be able to use them for other children as well, especially if, maybe they get scholarships or you name it, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail as we go along. So whenever we talk about special needs financial planning, it goes beyond the money. So obviously today we are going to be talking a lot about the money and how you use an ABLE account, which is obviously to help finance those long-term goals. But I think it's even more important to talk about all the other things that go into planning as well. And with the special needs lens, the siblings perspective, one thing you want to think about is who is going to take over this account in the future. I know Mary mentioned that it has to be either a guardian, either a power of attorney, or the individual themselves, or a parent, but obviously if the parents are no longer here, what role does the sibling have? Are they going to be the ones that are the signer for these accounts, or is there someone else that's then going to be taking over? So looking at from a legal perspective, I know a lot of people have asked, about special needs trusts and what is the difference between a special needs trust and an ABLE account. I think the most simple way to compare the two is that they are extremely different vehicles. There are some similar things. Obviously, yes, it is protected from government benefits. So your child can have assets in a special needs trust as long as it's drafted correctly, and they can have money in an ABLE account and still be eligible for government benefits. Again, underneath that $100,000 amount for the ABLE account. Folks would use a special needs trust in their estate plan. So that's really the vehicle that will hold all of your assets when you're no longer here on behalf of your child with special needs. You're able, just like the ABLE account, to name someone to oversee those funds. That's called the trustee. They make distributions from the special needs trust. So we would always recommend someone to have a special needs trust, and if it makes sense, also have an ABLE. So some different scenarios that we see people use a special needs trust and ABLE is actually to fund the special needs trust, and then to potentially have the trustee every single year fund the ABLE account with $15,000, kind of the max, or whatever amount makes sense for the family's financial situation. And a reason why somebody may do that is because of the different expenses that an ABLE account can pay for that a special needs trust may not be able to pay for. One specifically is housing. So this is something that a lot of people, again, take monies out of the special needs trust to fund the ABLE account so the beneficiary can pay for different housing expenses on a monthly basis. There are specific rules around that. So if you're going to be doing that, just make sure that you pay the housing expenses the same month that you make the distribution from the ABLE, or just remember that there's a couple of rules you need to look into there. So that's a really wonderful way. Another reason why somebody would take monies from a special needs trust and fund an ABLE is to give the person with special needs the ability to spend their money kind of as they would choose, obviously under those different categories, and not have to ask the trustee every single time and still have it protected for government benefits. So there are ABLEs out there that you can have debit cards. I know the Fidelity one, there is the option to do that. So people can use ABLE either for today's expenses or for future expenses. A lot of times the ABLE account is more used to accrue assets over time. So the person with special needs, if they're working, it's a great place for them to feel, you know, I'm able to save money in my name, just like my brother or sister, just like my parents. And it really obviously would make them feel very, very good, again, that they're able to save for their future goals, just like everyone else. So I think that that's a really powerful way to use the ABLE and something that we see people doing often. So really the ABLE account is used for longer term savings or current expenses, whereas a special needs trust is a parent's tool to fund their assets at a parent's passing. So an ABLE account can really only be used for cash deposits. You would never be able to put your home into an ABLE account. Cash has to go into an ABLE account. So that's, you know, pros and cons. But again, I think the first step that a parent and family needs to go through is kind of go over these different 5 factors of planning, and you want to make sure that you plan for yourself first. So if you're considering funding an ABLE account, you want to make sure that that's with other income that you have that you may not need for your personal goal of retirement or for your immediate expenses, because you can obviously use money in your name to pay for things on behalf of your son or daughter, but there are limitations with what can be used for the ABLE. So again, it really depends on what your personal situation is. So, you know, it may make sense if your child's 10 years old, especially if maybe they're getting gifts every single year from family and friends. The ABLE is a great place to kind of, you know, put those different savings into a vehicle that will protect for the future. So you don't have to worry once they approach the age of 18, what do you do with that savings? How do you, we'll go over that in a few minutes, but kind of looking at these different factors. Obviously today we're talking about the government benefits. How do you protect them? If there is money in your child's name, that's by using potentially an ABLE. The family and support, that's thinking of the siblings and what will make their life easier. If you are asking them to maybe serve as trustee, does it also make sense for them to have to manage an ABLE account? Kind of thinking about all these different things and how they work together, and really important that you have a conversation with those siblings. I think that that's the one step that a lot of parents kind of forget, is they coordinate all of this stuff together, but then don't talk to the siblings. So Mary, if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Yep.
And this is something that we talk about often. I think it's a little funky here because we've been using Apple and Mac computers and non-Mac computers, but here's something that I think is just a helpful tool for folks to kind of go through when you're thinking about the ABLE account. Age 18, that really is when the assets, if there are any in your child's name, will count against them for SSI. So that is a lot of times when folks call us up and say, should we open an ABLE account, or what are the different options that we have? And, you know, obviously now it's so much better than it ever was, just because years ago, if there was money in the child's name, the family would either try to spend it down as quickly as possible on things that they may not need to be able to qualify for SSI, or they have to create a special type of trust that could be very expensive to start as well, called a D4A or first party trust. So one thing I do want to mention, there's a lot of wonderful positive things about the ABLE account, but there is currently in the state of Massachusetts what's called a payback provision. So if there are any assets within the ABLE account and the beneficiary passes away, then Medicaid would be reimbursed for the different expenses that Medicaid paid for the time frame that the ABLE account was opened. So if you opened it when the person's 30 years old, they were on Medicaid from 30 to 35, or maybe from 18 to 35, but ABLE would only have to be reimbursed for the years that the ABLE account was open. So something unique that's not like the other types of special needs trusts. So just something to be aware of. And other states are actually deciding to not have the payback provision. So there may be a day that Massachusetts decides to do the same thing and not have a payback provision. So, but at the same time, it really does give the beneficiary a lot of flexibility with their personal savings. So, and then Mary, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So thought obviously today talking mostly about the different strategies and how and when do you use an ABLE account. So one of the first is to help to avoid that spend down process, just like I mentioned a few minutes ago. So when the person maybe, a lot of times babies receive different bonds, or they have received gifts over the years, you open up a money market account, you now have $5,000 in your child's name. Well, they haven't increased the SSI asset limit in decades. So it's still the $2,000. So really easy, open an ABLE account. There's no what's called a look back period. Your child will automatically be eligible for SSI as long as they no longer have the $2,000 in their name if you used an ABLE account. You really don't want to gift to other people or do items like that that may potentially reduce their balance to below 2,000, because SSI will actually look at that and potentially make it so they're not eligible for SSI for a couple of months. So an ABLE is a fabulous way to be able to keep the money in your child's name, have them use it for future purposes that, and again, just not being wasteful and kind of, getting rid of it or spending it for things that they don't need. So just like Mary mentioned too, another option is if the person is working and really struggling to keep that rep payee account below the $2,000, or maybe they're not even eligible for SSI, but they are able to work and they want to contribute to a retirement plan, they don't have one through work, they're actually able to contribute even more than the $15,000. They could contribute up to $12,490 more, and may even be able to deduct some of that from their income for tax purposes. So really wonderful way to, again, be able to have them feel equal to everyone else, because they 100% are. It only makes sense for them to be able to save just like we've been able to save. And then another thing is to stay below the $2,000 in a rep payee account, which we've talked a lot about. And then, being able to gift from grandparents and others. I remember having so many conversations with grandparents, they'd call up and say, I want to be equal and fair. We're gifting into a 529 plan for other grandchildren. Why can't I gift to my grandchild with special needs? And this is just so rewarding for the grandparents to be able to gift into an account. They know it's in their grandchild's name, and they can use it for things that will really help them in the future. One planning strategy that we've talked a lot about is, for parents that are trying to maybe remove some assets from their personal estate, and maybe they are other siblings. One thing would be to fund the ABLE account every single year, obviously making sure you're staying below the $100,000, because SSI is an important benefit to have. But then also at the same time, maybe gifting to Roth IRAs for your other children. I think that if you're potentially going to be asking someone to take over some different responsibilities in the future, or just to be as equal and fair, a lot of times parents ask us, how do we make our children feel equal, recognizing that everyone has different abilities and therefore has different long-term lifetime kind of supplemental requirements. But one way, again, is to kind of, because the ABLE account grows tax-free, same thing with the Roth. So if your children are working and they're eligible, maybe they're using their income to meet their current expenses, but you have enough savings, again, first making sure you're planning for yourself, but if you have any extra and you're kind of looking to how do you plan for the next generation, funding an ABLE and funding a Roth for your children is a great idea. Or maybe your child isn't on SSI, and maybe because they're working, and maybe they're never going to be eligible for SSI because of their income, but they do have limitations that would qualify them for the ABLE account. Even funding a Roth account for them as well, in addition to an ABLE, may make a lot of sense. So again, I think that the biggest thing with the ABLE is really looking at it. Is it an account that you're using now, or is it something that you want to save long term? So I think another way to use the ABLE account is really to help teach your children some different money management skills. Maybe use the debit card, put some funds onto the debit card, and have them go out and go into the store and learn how to use money that's in their name in a way that's safe, protecting some of the principal, but putting a little bit outside, so that they're able to, again, learn some of those different money management skills and still remain eligible for SSI. So also, one thing that a lot of people have been calling us about is the stimulus checks that they received from Social Security, and if they should, and are they able to put them into the ABLE account? The answer is yes. However, you do have 1 year from when they receive the stimulus to spend that money before Social Security would disqualify them for being above the $2,000 amount. So just something for people to be aware of. And then thinking of siblings, I think that there are a lot of siblings out there that maybe aren't married yet, maybe, want to figure out what should their beneficiaries be, how can they save for their sibling for their future, talking to them about creating an ABLE account. But it's really important for everyone to know that you can only have one. So you can't have, 5 different ABLE accounts out there. So if the parents do open an ABLE account, share with the siblings that this account has been opened. And if they have an extra couple $100, couple $1,000 a year, whatever it may be, obviously making sure it's below that $15,000 amount, that they can then contribute to the ABLE account for their siblings. I think siblings often think about this stuff, but don't always vocalize it. So I think the earlier that you start having these conversations, the more secure the family member as a whole will feel. I know that, our family, we always kind of would talk about everything. We always would support one another, but at the same time, sometimes didn't have these deep in-depth conversations just because we knew everybody was doing some type of planning, but really important, again, to have those conversations. So I think it's a great tool to have in the toolbox to be able to use the ABLE accounts. And again, siblings to be able to make those contributions if individuals are working, or if there are remaining assets in 529 plans from anyone in the family. Really, the ABLE account is a great place to be able to put those different savings. So that's kind of a really high level of how we use the ABLE account. Here's just some different, here's pictures of my wonderful brother here. He's just the happiest, cheeriest guy in the entire world. And I really thought it'd be helpful to kind of talk about the future and creating a vision for the future and different tools that you can use. So one of the first things that we always talk about is doing what's called a person-centered plan. And what that is actually talking about your family member with your family member present and having everybody chip in and, what do we think that they would really like to do? Or what do we think that this ABLE account could potentially be used for in the future? Is he gonna move out of the family home? Is he gonna live independently? Is he gonna move in with, the siblings? Where is he? Where do they really enjoy to be? So again, having a person-centered plan, I think, is a great place to just get people talking. We had some really interesting experiences where people that were trying to think about what they would like to do, and one gentleman really wanted to go drive, and but people were like, I'm not sure if he's quite ready to be on the road, or I don't want to be on the road with him quite yet. He needs to learn a little bit more. So someone's idea was that he actually would, at a driving range, that he would drive the golf cart to pick up all the different balls. So they're like, oh my gosh, that's such a great idea. So I think just getting people into one room. Also, my brother will do some things for me that he would never do for my other brother. So really important, again, for us to just have a platform for us to have those different conversations. And I think people are really open now to be doing, maybe connect through a Zoom and have a conversation and get people from all over the country getting to know your son or daughter a little bit more. Maybe not, maybe they're not showing their true colors if they're sitting in front of a screen, but at the same time, just to see their faces and each other to get a sense as to what they want for the future. The letter of intent, I can't talk enough about, just because it is truly a brain dump of all the information that parents know that really don't even think about sharing. It's the stuff that they do every day mindlessly without even thinking twice. So this is a document that really outlines that, and I think it's a really important tool to even start thinking about, well, if these are things that I'm doing every single day, how do I replace those different responsibilities, and with who? So I like to almost write down a day in the life of, a parent. And are there medications that you're dispensing in the morning? Are you helping with, the hygiene in the morning? Putting their clothes out the night before? What are those different things from literally the first moment you wake up until you go to bed? So then you can start to talk to, again, family members, friends. And we like to talk a lot about building a team to carry on, which, when thinking about the siblings, you kind of need to think about what will their future role be. And it's okay if siblings don't want to be involved. I say just talk about it and then figure out how to make it so that they are living at a distance. Maybe they visit once a year, maybe they don't, and that's okay. I think that everybody's had a different experience in growing up, and everyone kind of has different emotions related to childhood experiences, and you name it. And some have made it so you want to go in a different direction. Some have brought us all closer. And again, I think it's just no judgment zone whatsoever. Just have a conversation about it and plan from there. And it may change. It may change if you are introducing, well, you know what, we have a professional to help with the trustee services. You're not going to be the one writing checks, you know, making distributions, worrying about, is there going to be enough money? Your job is just to make sure that there's someone there to review the statements once a year to make sure the distributions are being made from the special needs trust on behalf of your brother or sister. Or thinking about, you know, who's going to be the guardian. The guardian doesn't have to be the person that lives with your brother or sister. You know, you can be independent, have your own family, and still be your brother or sister's guardian without, again, having to have them move into your basement or your spare bedroom. Families are a lot closer these days than probably ever have been, given that we are experiencing a pandemic that is, you know, making us live in closer quarters. I think probably siblings are experiencing a little bit more hands-on if they are living at home, you know, with a sibling, where people were outside of the house a lot more. So this is maybe a perfect opportunity to kind of start having those conversations, or maybe bringing in a facilitator to have some of these conversations to kind of talk about that. So I know this conversation wasn't 100% on that, but I think with any sibling's perspective, it is talking about that next generation and how do you pass the baton. You know, I think a lot of siblings are kind of like me. We're a little bit controlling. I think that it's kind of being the oldest sister. I know who I am, and I like to know what's going to happen, and or at least know how to prepare for it, to be prepared for it. And I think a lot of siblings that I've talked to are very similar in that they, you know, have had a little bit of a different experience, and they want to talk about the future. And I think a letter of intent is a tangible thing that you can do with the siblings so they can feel like they are in a little bit more control, and that they can also have a little bit more, you know, conversation, that it's okay to talk about what their vision is for the future as well for their brother and sister. And I think Cindy, she had a very unique experience because her mom thought that she knew what was best for her brother. And then Cindy thought that she knew what was best for her brother, but then Ron spoke up and he said, guys, I know what's best for me. So they thought they were doing everything they possibly could. They were thinking about him day in and day out about, you know, what his long-term plan would be. They thought he'd love to live with, like, you know, 4 different guys. He's super social. He said, yeah, I love hanging out with people, but I only want to have one roommate, you know, and then kind of they built his life around that. You know, luckily he did speak up and kind of share that with him. And that's exactly what a person-centered plan is. It's a time for everyone to talk together. And I'm kind of bouncing around today on these different ideas and topics, but I think it's kind of different items that are coming to my mind of being a sibling. And especially, I think, again, during these unique times, I think it's even more important to kind of start thinking about that type of stuff. So different resources that we have, you can download on our website, the letter of intent, as well as the housing checklist, which I think is really helpful for folks that are around the turning 18. And when you're thinking about this, also the US News just recently put together an article on the ABLE accounts last Friday that I think was super informative. Maybe we'll have Mary send it out as well. It kind of goes over a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, I think, in a pretty nice format. But Massachusetts really has done an incredible job with the Fidelity 529A ABLE account. Super easy to open and a great tool to kind of have it in combination with a special needs trust in your own long-term plan as well.
And then lastly, I think this is just your...
Yeah, our disclosures, being in the financial industry, have a lot of those.
Oh, well, Alex, that was so helpful. And just, I can't thank you enough for sharing your family's experiences with this and how you talk about these things within your family and among your family. So that was just, I found it so helpful, and I hope others did as well. I didn't know, you mentioned a team to carry on a little bit. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to say about that. You sort of talked about in general what that is, but is that something you sort of thought up that concept? Is that right?
Yeah, so it kind of was developed as like I would say our family really did, and I kind of spearheaded just because, like I mentioned, my personality, I really want to be able to, you know, figure out, I'm a problem solver, figure out what are we going to do. James needs, you know, a lot of care, and I 100% am there and would be happy to have him come live with us one day, but I know that that's not what my parents' vision is. So yes. We had this aha moment. Okay, you're thinking this, I'm thinking this. Well, let's develop an idea and help other families to do what's called, developing a team to carry on. And every family's team is different, just because there may be siblings, maybe there's not siblings. So I joined the Massachusetts Guardianship Association to really get to learn what the options are for families. And there's actually like a public guardianship kind of pilot program that's rolling out right now, that because some families may not need a guardian, some families need only a power of attorney, healthcare proxy for their loved one. So we kind of have a process that we go through, starting with the letter of intent to identify, what are the different roles and responsibilities that a family has, making sure that they have their estate plan in place, the guardianship, kind of working with them through, we call that special needs timeline. Usually we talk with the team to carry on as families get a little bit older, recognizing it's really important when they're young as well, but usually one parent lives a nice, long, healthy life, and we make adjustments to that as time goes on, and really kind of making sure they're planning for the financial assets, and that's where they're spending the majority of their time kind of when they're younger. And then as they get older, really talking about what we call the human assets, those people. And, because my brother could give him all the money in the world, and he's starting to learn the concept of a dollar because he knows it'll get him a can of Coca-Cola. But besides that, I think he doesn't really understand money kind of backs up a lot of things, and including, paying for the people that do support him day in and day out. So that's really what we want to make sure we're able to continue is the people in his life. So, and we feel that a combination of both family and professionals is always the way to go.
So great. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And we do have a couple of questions. So I think, and we addressed a lot of this, but I think this is so much information. So maybe we'll just make sure we answer these questions too. So we have two questions about Social Security eligibility. So I don't know if Mary, you want to just reiterate and just kind of clarify. I'll read the two questions. The first person is just asking if $100,000 is the limit, so that if someone goes over that, they are susceptible to having their Social Security suspended. And then the second question, which is related, is the person is asking, how much money can I have in a regular bank account if I also have an ABLE account, and also for SSI purposes? So maybe you could just clarify that a little bit so that everyone knows the full asset cap. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So 100,000 is the mark to keep the number to keep in mind if you get SSI or supplemental security income. You want to stay under that because if you do go over that in the ABLE account, they'll suspend the benefit. They'll suspend your benefits until you drop back under. So essentially, 100,000 is just that number that you want to keep in mind if you have an ABLE account, that you want to stay under that so that it doesn't affect your benefits. And then in terms of the other question about how much money can I have in another account, that's a little out of my lane. I mean, I guess I would say, unless you have an ABLE account or a special needs trust, and maybe Alex can speak more to this, but those are the only two vehicles that allow you to save over that $2,000 asset cap without it affecting your benefits. So I view the ABLE account as a savings tool or vehicle, and and a trust is more of more estate planning. But maybe Alex can weigh in on more on that. But yeah, essentially these two things are really allowing you to save over that $2,000 asset cap that exists for these means tested benefits.
So actually, really, I guess that is the answer too, now that I'm thinking about, so really it would be in another type of bank account, that $2,000 would still be that asset cap. Is that right? Oh, yeah. Okay. So hopefully that's helpful. And then maybe you can both say, because trusts always come up, and you talked about both of them, Alex, as trusts and ABLE accounts as being both useful tools. So maybe you could each just talk a little bit about how, for a long time, I know we got questions about, which is better, and we had to say, that's not the question, because you can really have both, and you explained how both can be utilized. But maybe you could both each just say a few words about that too, and how they work together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, essentially that question comes up all the time. And yeah, you can definitely have both. You can definitely, it's not an either or, you know, if you're able to do both, absolutely do both. And Alex will speak more at length on that, I'm sure. But, you know, essentially the difference is, you know, a trust can accept unlimited, you know, dollars essentially. And it can also accept non-cash assets like real estate. You know, ABLE doesn't have that capability. You know, it has a yearly limit that you can put into it, which is the 15K, and it does have an overall limit. And you can't put, you know, real estate into an ABLE account. So, yeah, those are kind of some differences between the two, but certainly they're both fantastic tools. And like I said, if you can do both, absolutely, you know, do both.
And also, you can identify successor beneficiaries. You can identify parameters in the special needs trust. So it's really unique to your loved one. And there's not typically a payback if you create a special needs trust in advance. So I feel that it's almost necessary for folks to have both if you do have any savings that you would like to pass on to your child. I think that they work extremely well together, but you don't want to just have one. It's kind of a little bit of an umbrella statement, but they are very different tools, and I feel that they work well together. But you know, if you have more than $15,000 that you were going to leave to your child, you likely do need a special needs trust so that you are giving your special needs child, you know, some flexibility with how they use the money, versus having to put it into a special type of special needs trust. So really important to the planning in advance. Don't want to get in a rat hole with like the different types of trusts, but really important to, I think, meet with an estate planning attorney, do those basic documents so that if something were to happen to you, a special needs trust be funded, and the trustee would then potentially fund an ABLE every year for your son or daughter.
So helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's great. And do you want to talk about, Alex, I know just not to go into detail, but typically how people start to fund a trust, a special needs trust, what they might use to fund it?
Sure. So typically, if the family is, you know, planning for their own retirement, and maybe a little, they're not super concerned, but want to make sure they have access to their retirement assets, usually people do not fund a special needs trust until both parents pass away. And the reason is because a special needs trust is an irrevocable trust, which is then taxed at the highest tax bracket. And it is what it says, irrevocable. So whatever money you put in there can be a little bit challenging to get out. And say you need some care. You don't want to have it in the special needs trust if you may need access to some of those funds for your future. Just because if your child's living with you, or maybe not living with you, you really want to make sure that, you know, again, you can spend your own money for whomever and however you'd like, but once it goes into the trust, there's very specific rules. A lot of people use life insurance to fund special needs trusts. That's a really easy way to make sure that there are assets there in the future. There are different life insurance that you can guarantee, you know, future death benefits. So then, you know, if I were to use all of my money, which may or may not be likely for some people, that trust would be funded using the life insurance almost no matter what. So that's a very common way. So, but people can make gifts during their lifetime into a special needs trust. But I feel that most of the time people fund it upon both spouses passing. And again, the reason is because it becomes irrevocable once it's funded. And you can use your money for your kid or for whoever.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we have one other question, or maybe at least one. Is it best to wait to set up an ABLE account until after guardianship is put in place?
I don't think that's a contingency of, you know, signing up for the ABLE account. I think it really would depend on what the financial situation is, and if there are assets in your child's name, it may make sense to do it earlier just so that you're not rushing all around when the child turns age 18, especially if you know for sure that they're going to be eligible for SSI. So if you have monies that you want to put into an ABLE that you really are looking to set aside and don't need for your financial goals, the earlier the better. It is a tax-free, vehicle. Again, as long as you know that they will qualify for SSI, there's no reason to wait for guardianship that I'm aware of. Mary, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, yeah, I mean, in terms of, I'm not sure if they were referencing the PSA, but as long as, an individual who was looking to be a PSA, say it was a parent on, a child's ABLE account. So in order to be a PSA, you have to be, speaking for attainable, a parent, a guardian, or a power of attorney. So yeah, I mean, if it's that situation, I mean, if you're a parent looking to open one for a child, you certainly don't have to wait for, guardianship.
That's great. And then another person is asking if we can speak about the best ways to get money out of the ABLE account. And then there's a secondary part of that question. It should not be transferred to the SSDI rep pay account, correct?
Yeah, so essentially, and in fact, it's on now, that Social Security document, the POMS. You can actually, they say that you can direct deposit into ABLE your SSA money. But what I wanted to say was, yeah, Fidelity offers something called, essentially how this works is you have your ABLE account, and then when you want to pay your expenses, when that individual wants to pay their expenses, they're going to move the money from the ABLE account, say, into their checking account and pay their expenses. Fidelity, and so you could just use it move it into your personal checking account and pay your expenses. Fidelity offers a cash management account that is free, which essentially is a free checking account that you can link to your attainable account. And that comes with a debit card. Alex was talking about that in terms of just, trying to encourage, I guess, some financial independence and ownership. So how that would work, it's the same process where, you move the money from ABLE into the cash management account and then pay your bills from there. But then just be aware, like once the money leaves ABLE, it's not protected anymore. So you don't want then money piling up in this cash management account, because then it's not in the ABLE account anymore. You're going to move it as you're paying your bills, essentially. And like I said, Fidelity offers that cash management account, and it comes with a free debit card. And so that's how you get that debit card, if you link it to this cash management account.
Great. And then
you can use it for a lot of different things. I think they have a very broad definition. So say, your son or daughter has a companion, you can pay the companion. They can, go out to eat and use it for that, as long as it's kind of making their life better, easier, for, their clothing, a lot of different things, like what Mary kind of shared, the list of stuff.
that's great. That's great. It does seem to have a lot of flexibility, which is great. We do have a question. Can you contribute more than the $100,000 if the beneficiary is on SSDI, but a dual eligibility for Medicaid?
So, I always tell people up front, I am certainly not a Social Security expert, so they really need to consult somebody that works in that space. But my understanding is that SSDI is not means tested. So, that $100,000 mark doesn't apply to that.
Okay.
But I guess, yeah, but I guess I would say, they really need to, consult, somebody maybe who's doing benefits counseling for Social Security to determine that. And there's no impact. So if you have an ABLE account, if you're on Medicaid or Mass Health, there's no impact on Medicaid if you have an ABLE account.
That's a wonderful point too. And then another question, when I pass away, how does Social Security determine what amount can be put into an ABLE account and what separately can be paid to my spouse?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. Let's see. When I pass away, how does Social Security determine what amount can be put into an ABLE account and what amount can be paid separately to my spouse.
I don't think that this is really an ABLE question. I don't think the Social Security
Right.
Social Security does not deposit anything directly into the ABLE account. And
Right.
when somebody passes away, your assets would go through what's called probate, or they would follow beneficiary designations if you have like retirement accounts and life insurance accounts. I'm not sure if that answers your question. But Social Security, if you pass away, your child may be eligible for benefits off of your Social Security. So that's when you would go to the Social Security office, and they would also determine what your spouse would receive if you pass away. There is something called a family maximum. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but that really doesn't there would be no funds that would go directly to the ABLE from your Social Security. That would be another step that somebody would have to do if their Social Security benefits changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And then I think this might be the last one. If there's a 25-year-old working, and Mary, I think you addressed this, but how much more can be put into the ABLE account annually? Or maybe it was Alex had that in her slide.
Yeah, it's basically essentially up to the federal poverty line for one person, which is $12,490. So potentially you can contribute up to $27,490. The caveat with that though is you can't also be participating in the employer's retirement plan. So if the ABLE account beneficiary or the owner is going to take advantage of, putting in that extra amount, they can't also participate in the employer's retirement plan. You can't do both, essentially. You'd have to pick one or the other.
That's great. Well, that was so helpful, both of you. I'm just throwing all those questions. Great questions. So we had a terrific group of participants engaged, and I thank you all for joining and asking those questions. I'm sure they helped everyone on the webinar. And as Mary mentioned, we will send you a copy of this recording and some of the resources that were talked about so that you'll have all of those. And are there any last things that we forgot to talk about, Mary or Alex, that you'd like to say or share?
I don't think so. I will definitely include, Alex mentioned US News and World Reports actually just did a little piece on ABLE accounts. And so I'll include the link to the story with the recording and with the slides when I send it to people. Yeah, no, I think the takeaway is, I say to people, it's a lot of information to absorb. Sometimes you have to hear it more than once. But definitely the takeaway is that, it's ABLE and Trust. They're both great tools. You have to look at your own family situation and just honestly just figure out, what makes the most sense for you. But they're both great tools that can work together really nicely.
Awesome.
That's great. And I'll ask all of you also to please stay in touch with us at MEFA. Let us know what other types of webinars might be helpful, information, and MEFA and Mary and Alex are going to stay connected, and I'm sure we'll do some other things together as well. So we'll keep this conversation going.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for joining. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.